Beg all you want, Mr. Graves ignored you already.
The security chief said. He's not saving your kid. Move. The words rang off marble and glass and landed like a verdict. Executives flowed past the velvet rope, shoes whispering over polished stone, while the single dad stood in scuffed work boots with a maintenance badge and a folder pinned to his ribs. Behind the desk, a brass plaque gleamed with the billionaire's name. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. A harsher truth pulsed. A child's future was being decided in sealed paperwork, and nobody up here needed to raise their voice to erase a father. He didn't shout back. He exhaled once, slow, then opened the folder, flattened one page, and asked for a hearing date that wasn't on any public calendar. A corporate lawyer nearby paused, her smirk twitching like she'd heard a forbidden language. The lobby kept moving. The single dad's name was Caleb Rowan. He kept this tower breathing at night, filters, valves, boilers, while his daughter fought to keep breathing at all. Calm was the only thing he could afford, so he wore it like armor. I'm not asking for money, he said. I'm asking for access. Access is for people who matter, the chief replied. My daughter matters, Caleb said. And the steadiness in his voice made the words heavier. A screen on the wall looped Elliot Graves smiling beside a banner about protecting children. Caleb looked once, then away. My hearing is in 48 hours, he said. The chief laughed. Family court doesn't move that fast. It does, Caleb answered. Yeah, when someone files an emergency petition under seal and requests venue alignment with a private auditorium. The lawyer in slate gray stepped closer, badge reading Marianne Holt, counsel. She took in the uniform, the worn folder, and decided he was supposed to lose. You're causing a disturbance, she said. Mr. Graves is unavailable. Leave. Caleb swallowed the spike of panic. He pictured Lila's fingers squeezing his twice in the hospital bed, her eyes too big for her face, her voice thin from fighting air. He remembered the administrator's clipboard, the phrase custody review spoken like a billing code. He'd promised she wouldn't wake up alone in a strange house. That promise lived in his chest like a second heartbeat. I'm trying to stop the state from removing my child, he said. This is the only door left. Holt's expression stayed polished. Removal isn't decided in corporate lobbies. It's being decided in your building, he said. Sealed docket, emergency calendar, private venue. Her eyes sharpened despite herself. Docket prefix? E, he said, not F. A small pulse jumped at her jaw. The chief stepped in, annoyed. You don't understand how this works. Caleb's hands trembled once, then steadied as he covered the corner of the annotated page with his thumb. I understand systems, he said. I fix what people pretend isn't broken. The chief reached for the folder. Caleb angled his shoulder, blocking the grab with smooth instinct. Don't, he warned, soft but final. Holt's gaze dropped to the page he protected. A narrow footnote sat in the margin, handwriting neat and unmistakably confident. Her face drained a shade. That citation, she murmured. Caleb watched the shift and felt something dangerous rise. Hope. She'd stopped seeing him as disposable. The elevators chimed. Elliot Graves stepped out with assistants and a bodyguard, suit tailored to look effortless, eyes skimming past people like furniture. The chief straightened. Holt rebuilt her mask too quickly. Graves' gaze flicked over the maintenance uniform, then the folder. What is this? He asked. Caleb stepped forward before anyone could stop him. His heart punched once, then settled. Sir, please, my daughter's hearing. No, Graves said, like deleting a file. Not today. Executives slowed, sensing heat. Caleb lifted the folder an inch, not as a weapon, but as proof the record still existed. "Then, hear me in public," he said, "because your name is about to enter my case, and it won't leave." Graves paused, finally, turning back with a faint frown. Holt had gone very still, color fading from her cheeks. Near the revolving doors, a young clerk with a courthouse lanyard stopped walking, eyes narrowing as if he'd just found a thread worth pulling. Caleb felt the tower's vibration through his boots, the steady hum of machines hidden behind walls, the kind nobody notices until they fail. He'd lived his life where power never looked. Now his daughter's future hung on ink, and he was done being invisible. His phone vibrated in his pocket, clinic number again. He didn't answer yet. He watched the billionaire's entourage, watched Holt's pallor, then turned toward the service elevator. If they wouldn't open a door, he'd force a record today. The service elevator doors slid shut, sealing him into a humming metal throat that smelled of oil and ozone. He leaned back against the rail, breath measured, thumb pressed over the folded page as if it might vanish. Above, the lobby noise dulled, but the stakes sharpened with every floor. If they buried the docket, Layla would be moved before sunrise, and promises would become apologies. The elevator chimed at sublevel 3, and he stepped into the service corridor, boots echoing past cages of spare filters. A red exit sign flickered like a pulse. His phone vibrated again, then again, until he answered. The nurse spoke gently, words practiced but kind, explaining the oxygen numbers, the clock, the risk. He closed his eyes and pictured small fingers squeezing twice, the signal they'd made for bravery. "I'm on my way," he said, and meaning it in more ways than one. In the corridor, a young clerk hesitated near a rolling cart, eyes darting as if the walls listened. "You shouldn't be here," the clerk whispered, then swallowed. "Neither should sealed hearings in private buildings," he replied, not stopping. The clerk caught up, lowering his voice, saying the prefix mattered, that the calendar was hidden, that a name rerouted files. He listened, nodding once, storing it like torque values memorized under pressure. They reached a metal door marked Archive, and the clerk palmed it open. Inside, the air was cold and papery, lights buzzing over rows of cabinets. He slid the folder onto a table and revealed the page he'd guarded. The footnote referenced an emergency alignment rule, obscure, sharp, precise. The clerk's breath caught. That's not public," he said. "It is when the state shortcuts a child," he answered. Footsteps approached, brisk and confident, heels clicking like a metronome. The lawyer appeared in the doorway, color still off, eyes fixed on the table. "You can't file that here," she said too fast. He didn't argue. He set the page flat and asked for the record to reflect receipt. Her hands shook before she hid them. From the hallway, voices rose, the billionaires among them, smooth and irritated. Time narrowed. He thought of the machines he kept alive by noticing what others ignored. This was the same work, only louder. If you're still with me, subscribe and turn the bell on, because this record is about to change everything. The clerk swallowed and nodded, sliding a stamp across the table. The lawyer hesitated, then stepped aside. In the corridor, the elevator dinged again, closer this time. He took one last look at the page, folded it back into the folder, and squared his shoulders. Whatever came next would happen on the record, with witnesses. He stepped out as voices surged, ready. The doors opened to a knot of suits and security, the air tight with perfume and impatience. No one spoke at first, surprised to see him emerging from below. Then the billionaire's gaze landed, assessing, dismissive. "This ends now," the billionaire said. He met the stare without flinching and held up the folder, not high, just visible. "It ends on the record," he replied. Around them, phones lifted, curiosity sharpening into attention. The lawyer cleared her throat, voice thin, requesting a brief recess that wasn't hers to ask for. The clerk stood behind him, stamp ink still wet. Pressure built like steam. He felt the familiar calm settle, the kind that arrives when variables align. Somewhere above, a child waited. Security shifted, unsure. "You don't understand the consequences," the billionaire warned. He nodded once, acknowledging gravity, not fear. "I understand custody clocks," he said, and stepped forward. The hallway seemed to hold its breath. The stamp hit paper behind him, decisive. A murmur rippled. With that sound, the case moved from shadows into light. He felt the shift and allowed himself one breath of hope. The next door was opening, whether they liked it or not. He turned toward the hearing rooms as voices chased him, footsteps quickening. Behind glass, assistants whispered, recalculating. Ahead, a red light blinked above a door marked "In Session." He reached for the handle, steady. Everything he'd done had led to this threshold. He pushed. Inside, the room buzzed with expectation, microphones leave, eyes ready. He stepped through as the door swung closed behind him. The record would begin again now. He set the folder down at the table's edge, spine straight, heart loud. Across the room, the billionaire took his seat, jaw tight. The clerk announced the matter, voice steady despite the wait. He waited for the cue, hands still, ready to speak when called. Somewhere far away, a machine beeped, keeping time. He thought of her smile and did not look away. The hearing began. Everyone listened. So did the truth. At last. Now. The clerk's voice finished the docket call and the room settled into a hush that felt heavier than silence. He stayed standing until directed, hands resting on the folder's edge, spine straight, eyes forward. Across the table, the billionaire adjusted his cufflinks as if the air itself were an inconvenience. Cameras glowed red along the wall, small suns hungry for something worth remembering. The judge's chair loomed empty for a breath too long, and in that pause, power tried to reassert itself. "Let's make this quick," the billionaire murmured to his counsel, not quite sotto voce. The words drifted anyway, landing where they were meant to. On him. He absorbed them without reaction, counting the faint buzz from the lights, the steady thrum of the building he knew better than anyone in the room. Systems spoke if you listened. The judge entered, robes swaying, gaze scanning faces, pausing a fraction too long on the maintenance uniform before smoothing. Procedure resumed. The state's attorney stood first, voice polished, presenting urgency as inevitability. Words like safety and stability were arranged like furniture, blocking exits. He watched the pattern assemble and noted the seams. When it was his turn, he rose with measured pace and requested confirmation of venue authority. The judge nodded, already impatient. He placed the folder down and slid the page forward. Not dramatic, just precise. The attorney objected on reflex, then hesitated, eyes flicking to the lawyer who'd gone pale earlier. Something had snagged. "Objection noted," the judge said, uncertain. "Basis?" "Emergency alignment," he replied. "Under the E prefix, subsection 7. A murmur rippled. The billionaire leaned forward, annoyance sharpening. "This is ridiculous." He met the judge's gaze, calm and tact. Respectfully, "It's binding." The judge glanced to the clerk, and the clerk swallowed, checked the system, and nodded. "It appears, yes, Your Honor." The room shifted. A small thing, but rooms move when rules turn. The state pivoted, pushing character instead. Hours worked. absences, a narrative of neglect. He listened, jaw set, feeling the old anger scratch, then let it pass. When invited to respond, he did not defend himself yet. He asked for the medical timeline to be entered. The attorney protested relevance. He waited. The judge allowed it. As dates stacked, the story cracked. Transfers overlapped hearings. Notifications lagged. A pattern emerged that money usually hides. He watched the billionaire's counsel whisper urgently, watched the billionaire's smile thin. Somewhere behind him, the clerk shifted weight, courage hardening into something like resolve. The judge frowned. Why was this expedited? The attorney answered too fast. Risk. Defined how? Silence stretched. He filled it gently. By a petition filed after hours, he said, routed through a private calendar. The judge's pen paused. Who authorized venue? The billionaire's counsel stood. Your Honor, this is inappropriate. It's my building, the billionaire snapped, then stopped, realizing too late what he'd said. Phones lifted higher. A low hum of attention swelled. The judge raised a hand, eyes narrowing. Clarify. The billionaire recovered, smoothing his tone. Our foundation leases space. We don't direct hearings. He nodded once. The lease addendum does. The lawyer's breath hitched. He felt the moment approach, not triumph yet, but traction. He asked to read the footnote into the record. The judge allowed it, curious now. He read cleanly, without flourish. The language was spare, exact. The effect was not. Recognition sparked across the room like static. The lawyer stared at him, color draining again, as if seeing a signature she knew without seeing ink. The judge leaned back, eyes sharp. Who drafted this? He closed the folder. The court has it. The billionaire scoffed. Answer the question. He met the billionaire's gaze. It's not required. The judge considered, then nodded slowly. Proceed. He did, step by step, laying the path that forced the state's hand. Each move tightened the circle. Objections weakened. The judge asked for a recess, brief, and denied the billionaire's request to move chambers. Public stayed public. During the break, the billionaire stood, looming, voice low and edged. You're out of your depth. He didn't look up. Depth is relative. You think a footnote saves you? He finally met the billionaire's eyes. It opens the door. Across the room, the lawyer pulled the clerk aside, whispering hard. The clerk shook his head, then straightened, something settling in his shoulders. When proceedings resumed, the clerk's voice carried steadier than before. The judge returned with resolve. We will continue on the record. The billionaire's jaw tightened. The room leaned forward. He felt the shift fully now, the machinery he understood beginning to turn against those who assumed it only ran one way. This wasn't victory. It was the first honest motion. He thought of Lila's squeeze, twice, and breathed. The judge looked at him. State your relationship to the emergency alignment. He paused, then chose precision over revelation. I know how it works. The judge nodded. So do I now. The hearing moved into deeper water. Evidence followed. Timelines snapped into alignment. The billionaire's counsel faltered, then recalibrated. Cameras drank it in. He stayed anchored, calm, unbroken, letting the system expose itself. When the judge called the next witness, the billionaire stiffened. The lawyer swallowed. The clerk's eyes flicked to him, a silent question. He gave a barely there nod. Keep going. The room had changed. It was listening now, not just watching. He felt it and held steady, knowing the next turn would demand more than patience. The door he'd opened would not close quietly. The judge called the witness, and the lawyer rose too quickly, chair scraping. She smoothed her jacket, breath uneven, then began with rehearsed confidence that cracked at the edges. Questions aimed to narrow scope, to drag the case back into familiar grooves where urgency justified shortcuts. He listened, head slightly tilted, catching the stress fractures in her phrasing. Systems betrayed themselves when rushed. When it was his turn to question, he stood without flourish. He asked about timestamps first, then routing protocols, then who had access after hours. Each answer added weight to the record, not by accusation, but by accumulation. The lawyer objected on habit. The judge overruled on relevance. The room leaned closer. He felt the building's pulse beneath his boots, the same vibration he used to diagnose failing pumps. Patterns mattered. He drew a clean line between dates and decisions, then paused, letting silence do the work. The lawyer filled it, explaining a waiver that hadn't been filed. And the clerk's fingers hovered over the keyboard, then typed. A line appeared on the screen that shouldn't have. A murmur rippled. The billionaire shifted, impatience sharpening into something like concern. He caught the glance and returned it, steady. This wasn't personal, not yet. It was mechanical. The judge asked for clarification. The lawyer's voice thinned as she tried to reframe. He waited, then requested to submit the lease addendum. The billionaire's counsel sprang up, protesting foundation privilege. The judge asked for the document anyway. Privilege yielded to process. As pages slid into evidence, the judge's brow furrowed. A clause glinted like a blade. Venue alignment, contingent on donor access. The room stilled. He didn't smile. He felt the heat rise and kept his voice level. That clause created an expedited path unavailable to the public, he said, including parents without counsel. The judge nodded slowly. I see, the billionaire interjected, tone clipped. This is a misunderstanding. Then correct it, the judge replied. The lawyer tried to pivot, questioning his standing. He answered simply, grounding every response in the record. When she pressed his background, he deflected without lying. I know how filings move, he said. I know where pressure is applied. The clerk cleared his throat, then spoke, voice trembling but audible. He confirmed the routing anomaly and the after-hours authorization. The judge thanked him. Courage settled the room. A brief recess was called to review submissions. In the hallway, security hovered, unsure whom to follow. The billionaire approached, a voice low and controlled. You're embarrassing people who don't forget. He met the threat without flinch. I'm protecting my child. That won't matter if you burn bridges. He considered the words, then shook his head. Bridges that collapse under truth aren't bridges. The lawyer watched from a distance, eyes hollow. He felt no satisfaction, only focus. This wasn't about winning an argument. It was about time. Hours that decided where a child slept. Back inside, the judge returned with questions sharpened by scrutiny. The state was ordered to explain the acceleration. Explanations frayed. The judge requested a compliance report within the hour. Gasps flickered. Phones lifted higher. The billionaire's counsel whispered furiously. He felt momentum, fragile but real. He asked the court to stay removal pending review. The judge weighed, then granted a temporary hold. Relief surged and threatened to break his composure. He breathed through it, anchoring to the table's edge. The billionaire stood. This court is being misled. The judge met his stare. This court is correcting its course. A ripple of approval moved through the gallery, hushed but unmistakable. The clerk's shoulders eased. The lawyer sat, defeated by process she'd trusted to protect her. As the hearing adjourned for review, he gathered the folder, careful, respectful. He felt eyes on him now, not dismissive but curious. Power had noticed. That was dangerous, but it was also necessary. In the corridor, a reporter called out a question. He kept walking. The clerk caught up, whispering thanks, offering to flag any further anomalies. He nodded, grateful, and headed toward the clinic exit. Phone, already in hand. The nurse answered, voice brighter. Numbers were stable for now. He closed his eyes, letting the words wash over him. A stay wasn't a cure. It was a window. He turned back toward the hearing rooms as voices rose behind him, recalculating strategies, preparing counterattacks. The door ahead glowed with a red light, waiting. He squared his shoulders. The system had been nudged. Now it would push back. The corridor outside the hearing rooms felt tighter than before, as if the building had leaned in to listen. He paused at the threshold, fingers resting on the folder, the paper inside warm from his grip. The temporary hold echoed in his ears, not victory, just oxygen. He turned as the lawyer approached. Steps hesitant now, authority dulled by uncertainty. "Wait," she said, softer than before. He stopped. Her eyes flicked to the folder, then to his face. "That footnote," she began, then faltered. "Where did you learn it?" He considered the question, choosing restraint. "From the system," he said, "the parts nobody reads." She nodded, unsettled, and retreated without another word. Inside the room, staff shuffled papers, the clerk rechecking entries with care. The judge hadn't returned yet, but the audience remained, sensing a turn worth witnessing. He took his seat, posture composed, and laid the folder open. The annotated page sat there, plain, almost fragile, a humble thing that carried disproportionate weight. He slid it forward, aligning it square with the table edge, and waited. The judge entered and called the matter back to order. Proceedings resumed with sharper focus. The state attempted to reassert urgency, but the judge interrupted, asking for clarification on the emergency's origin. The answer circled, thin. He watched the judge's eyes drop to the page, then back up, curiosity blooming into intent. He asked permission to submit the page as a demonstrative exhibit. The judge allowed it. He lifted the paper and read the footnote again, cleanly, without adornment. The language did the work. A hush fell, deeper than before. The billionaire's counsel shifted, whispering, calculating angles that no longer fit. The judge asked who authored the rule. He closed the folder gently. "It's been cited," he said. "That's what matters." "Cited by whom?" the judge pressed. "By courts that needed it," he replied. The lawyer's face drained. She recognized the cadence now, the structure she'd studied years ago in a seminar she'd dismissed as academic. Her hands shook as she steadied her notes. Across the room, the billionaire's jaw tightened. He'd underestimated the paper, the man, the patience. A reporter's phone buzzed. Security glanced, uncertain. The judge warned the room, but allowed the record to continue. He felt the shift solidify. Public attention welded to process. This was the exposure he needed. He requested the compliance report immediately, citing the clause's activation. The judge agreed. The clerk typed, voice steady as he read the order aloud. The words echoed, official and irreversible. The billionaire stood, anger flashing. "This is theater," he snapped. "No," the judge replied, calm and firm. "This is correction." He felt the weight lift a fraction. Not relief yet, but recognition. The judge asked him to explain the page's significance to a lay audience. He did, carefully, translating complexity into fairness. He spoke of access, of clocks that moved faster for some than others, of children caught in margins. The room listened. If you want to see how this page changes everything, subscribe and turn the bell on, because the next move happens on the record, not behind closed doors. The judge nodded once, then addressed the state. "You will answer for the routing," she said. "Today." The lawyer swallowed and agreed. The billionaire's counsel whispered urgently. The gallery leaned forward. He sat back, hands still, eyes on the page. The humble object had done its work, not by force, but by fit. It belonged here now. He thought of Lila's squeeze twice and allowed himself a single breath of hope. The judge called the next step, ordering testimony from the foundation's administrator, and the billionaire stiffened. Cameras rose. The clerk announced the witness. He closed the folder and rested his palm on it, grounding himself. The discovery had happened. Now the consequences would unfold. As the administrator approached, pale and flustered, he knew the balance had shifted. Money could delay, threaten, posture. It couldn't erase a record once it breathed. He watched the room, felt the current turn, and stayed calm. The system, once nudged, was moving. The administrator took the stand with a stack of folders hugged to her chest, knuckles pale. She glanced once toward the billionaire, then fixed her eyes on the judge as if anchoring herself to procedure. He remained seated, still as a set screw tightened to spec, watching the small tells, the shallow breaths, the blink rate, and the way her answers would shorten when pressure rose. This was another system, human and brittle. The judge swore her in and began simply. Name, role, responsibilities. The administrator's voice steadied on rehearsed ground. When the questions turned to after-hours access, the cadence faltered. He leaned forward, just enough to be attentive, not aggressive. The judge asked who authorized the venue alignment. A name surfaced, then another, then a pause where the truth hovered. The billionaire's counsel objected, citing relevance. The judge overruled, gaze fixed. Answer. The administrator swallowed. The authorization came through the foundation's compliance channel. Whose channel? The judge asked. She hesitated, then said the name everyone expected and no one wanted to hear. A murmur spread, sharp and electric. He felt the room tilt. Cameras adjusted. The clerk's fingers flew. The lawyer who'd dismissed him earlier stared at the table, face ashen. The billionaire shifted, anger contained but visible now, a hairline fracture in the glass. The judge asked for documentation. The administrator produced emails, timestamps glowing on the screen like coordinates. He followed along, mapping the sequence, noting the overlap with the child's hospital admission. The coincidence was too clean. He asked permission to question. The judge nodded. He stood and asked about the emergency criteria, then about deviations. Each answer dug deeper. When the administrator tried to justify speed, he asked why a public venue wasn't used. She glanced toward counsel, then answered that privacy was requested. By whom? He asked gently. Silence answered first, then the name again. Heavier this time. The judge leaned back, eyes narrowing. This court does not move in shadows, she said. The administrator nodded, close to tears. The billionaire stood abruptly. Enough, he said. This is harassment. The judge's voice cut through. Sit down. He did, jaw clenched. He returned to his seat, pulse steady. This wasn't satisfaction. It was gravity asserting itself. He thought of Lila's chart, the oxygen numbers, the quiet bravery. He kept his focus on the process. The judge ordered a brief recess to review the emails. In the hallway, whispers bloomed. A reporter tried to corner him. He sidestepped, eyes forward. The clerk caught up, voice low, confirming additional anomalies flagged by the system. He nodded, grateful. "Put it on the record," he said. Back inside, and the judge returned with resolve sharpened. "The court finds sufficient cause to expand review," she announced. Gasps rippled. The judge turned to him. "Your request to stay removal remains in effect pending full audit." Relief surged and he reined it in. He nodded once. "Thank you, Your Honor." The Billionaire's counsel requested a sidebar. The judge denied it. Public stayed public. Phones lifted again. He felt the victory strategy advancing. Not the end, but exposure solidifying into consequence. The judge addressed the room. "Influence does not supersede access," she said. "This court will not be a private hallway." Applause threatened, then stilled under the gavel. He sat, hands folded, listening as orders were issued, reports due, testimony scheduled, compliance officers named. Each directive tightened the net. He felt the system turning, no longer ignoring the labor corridor where he'd lived. The lawyer approached during a pause, voice low and shaken. "You wrote that," she said, not a question. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth had found its place without a confession. The judge called for the next witness list. The Foundation's administrator stepped down, shoulders slumped. The billionaire stared at the table, calculating exits that no longer existed. He watched it all with a strange calm, like monitoring gauges during a controlled shutdown. When proceedings adjourned for the day, the judge set a time for continuation. Public notice was ordered. The words rang like a bell. He gathered the folder, careful as ever, and stood. Eyes followed him now, not dismissive, not mocking. Curious, respectful, some afraid. In the corridor, he finally answered his phone. The nurse's voice was brighter again. Lila was stable. He closed his eyes and leaned against the wall, letting the relief wash through his limbs. Not safe yet, but seen. He pushed off and walked toward the exit. Outside, rain had started, tapping the glass in a steady rhythm. He paused, feeling the cool air through the doors, and allowed himself a small, private nod. The discovery had shifted into motion. The next steps would test endurance. He was ready. Behind him, the hearing room doors closed, sealing the day's record. Ahead, the night waited, full of work and hope. Rain threaded down the courthouse glass in silver lines, blurring the city into streaks of light. He stepped outside and let the cool hit his face, a brief shock that kept him grounded. Reporters clustered under awnings, voices rising. But he angled away, cutting through the crowd toward the service ramp. The building hummed behind him, alive with recalculation. His phone buzzed. A text from the clerk. Audit requests logged. Foundation flagged. He replied with a single word, "Good," and tucked the phone away. The rain slicked his boots as he descended, the sound steady, familiar. He'd walked worse floors under heavier pressure. Tonight, the system had looked back. At the bottom of the ramp, headlights flared. A black sedan rolled to a stop, too clean for this corner. The rear door opened. The billionaire's counsel stepped out, coat immaculate despite the weather. She smiled without warmth. "We should talk." He kept moving. She matched his pace, heels clicking sharp. "This doesn't have to get ugly," she said. "Your child's situation can be handled quietly." He stopped. Rain dotted the folder, darkening the edges. Quiet is what put her at risk. She held up a hand. "Listen, there are ways to resolve this without witnesses?" he asked. Her smile thinned. From the sedan, the billionaire emerged, umbrella snapping open. His gaze cut through rain, pinning him. "You've made your point," the billionaire said. "Now stop." He felt the old urge to flinch and didn't. "The record isn't finished." "You want leverage?" the billionaire pressed. "Name it." He shook his head. "I want time and access for everyone." The billionaire laughed, short and sharp. "You don't get to rewrite the world." "No," he agreed, "just this file." Security hovered, unsure. The counsel leaned in, voice lowered. "We can make the audit go away." He met her eyes. "You can't unring a bell." The billionaire's patience snapped. "You think a footnote makes you untouchable?" He answered evenly. "I think the truth makes us accountable." Rain intensified, drumming harder. A small crowd had gathered despite the weather, phones up, curiosity sharpening. The billionaire noticed and adjusted, smoothing his tone. "We'll see you in court," he said, retreating into the sedan. The door shut with a muted thud. Tires whispered away. He exhaled and turned, heading toward the clinic. The night bus hissed to a stop, doors yawning open. He boarded, nodded to the driver, and took a seat by the window. City lights slid past, reflections stuttering across wet glass. His hands loosened around the folder at last. At the clinic, fluorescent light replaced rain. The nurse greeted him with a tired smile and led him to the room. Lila slept, chest rising with help, cheeks flushed but calm. He took her hand, felt the squeeze, twice. He leaned close and whispered promises he intended to keep. A doctor updated him in careful terms. Stable for now, watchful hours ahead. He listened, asked precise questions, noted answers. Systems again. When the doctor left, he sat, counting breaths with her until the rhythm steadied his own. His phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "We know who you are." No signature. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. The room smelled of antiseptic and rain-soaked wool. He closed his eyes and let the noise recede. Hours passed, measured by beeps and footsteps. Near dawn, the clerk texted again. Public notice posted. Hearing tomorrow, full gallery. He smiled faintly. Exposure had teeth now. He stepped into the hallway for coffee and found the lawyer there, shoulders slumped, coat damp. She looked up, eyes rimmed red. "I didn't know," she said. "You knew enough," he replied, not unkind. She nodded. "What happens now?" "Now, the system keeps going," he said, "if we let it." Back in the room, Lila stirred. He took her hand again, warmth anchoring him. Outside, the rain eased, leaving the city rinsed and honest for a moment. He felt tired, but it was the good kind, the fatigue that follows forward motion. When the sun crept pale over the horizon, he stood and stretched, rolling tension from his shoulders. Today would bring resistance dressed as procedure, pressure dressed as courtesy. He'd seen it before. He gathered the folder, edges softened by rain and use, and set it beside her bed like a talisman. The next confrontation would be louder, brighter, and watched by more eyes. He welcomed it. Power had tried to corner him in the dark. He'd brought it into the light. Morning light crept through the clinic blinds, pale and tentative, tracing thin bars across the floor. He watched it reach her bed and stop, as if respecting the machines that kept time with her breathing. The night had sanded him down to essentials. He kissed her forehead, whispered that he'd be back soon, and stepped into the hallway with the folder tucked under his arm. Downstairs, the city had shifted from rain to resolve. Coffee steamed in paper cups, and reporters gathered with practiced patience. He cut through a side exit and walked the long way toward the courthouse, boots finding a rhythm on damp concrete. Each step carried him closer to a room that would be too bright to hide in. Inside the building, the gallery filled early. Public notice had done its work. People who'd never met him took seats, drawn by the promise of a crack in something usually sealed. He found a chair at the table, set the folder down, and aligned the pages with care. Preparation was not bravado, it was respect for the moment. The clerk approached, voice low but steadier than yesterday. "We've compiled the audit trail," he said. "It's extensive." He nodded. "Put it on the record." The clerk smiled, a quick flash of pride, and moved away. Across the aisle, the billionaire arrived with an entourage pared down for optics. The confidence was back, but it had edges now, sharper and more brittle. The lawyer took her seat, eyes avoiding his. Cameras adjusted, finding angles. The judge's chair remained empty for a beat, letting anticipation stretch. If you're watching this unfold and want to see how preparation beats power, subscribe and turn the bell on, because what happens next only works in the open. The judge entered and called the room to order. Proceedings resumed with an inventory of findings, emails, authorizations, clauses that braided influence into access. Each item tightened the frame. The billionaire's counsel objected less. Objections rang hollow against documentation. He listened, marking where clarity would matter most. When his turn came, he didn't rush. He asked to walk the court through the timeline, step by step, translating jargon into consequence. He spoke of hours lost to rerouted files, of parents notified too late to respond, and of clocks that moved faster when money leaned on them. The room followed. This wasn't an attack, it was instruction. The judge asked about remedy. He proposed one that fit the harm: public venue, transparent scheduling, equal notice. Not punishment, correction. The judge nodded, considering. The billionaire shifted, displeased. The lawyer rose, voice careful. She acknowledged the irregularities and asked for leniency. He watched her choose words that might save a career without denying the truth. The judge listened, impassive. The billionaire stood, projecting calm. "We support reform," he said, "but this case should not be the vehicle." He met the judge's gaze. "It already is," he said, and waited. The judge asked him to explain why the case mattered beyond his family. He paused, then answered plainly. "Because the same shortcut that targeted my child exists for others," he said. "Today it's visible. Tomorrow it won't be unless we fix it." A murmur of agreement moved through the gallery. Phones lifted. The clerk typed, fingers confident now. The judge leaned back, weighing the room. She ruled. Expanded review ordered, compliance changes mandated, public calendar required for emergency cases. Applause threatened again and was stilled. The judge turned to him. "Your child remains with you pending medical clearance," she said. Relief surged, hot and bright. He nodded, swallowing it down. "Thank you." The billionaire's counsel requested a stay. The judge denied it. Cameras clicked. The billionaire's jaw tightened, mask slipping. He felt the exposure settle into consequence. Not the end, but momentum. After adjournment, the hallway buzzed. Reporters pressed closer now, questions tumbling. He answered a few carefully, keeping focus on process, not personalities. The clerk hovered nearby, buoyed. The lawyer stood off to the side, smaller somehow, then approached. "I should have seen it," she said quietly. "Now you do," he replied. "That matters." He stepped outside into clear air. The rain had washed the city clean, leaving edges sharp. He checked his phone. A message from the nurse. "She's asking for you." He smiled and turned toward the clinic. As he walked, he thought of the folder. Creased, ordinary, powerful only because it fit the system perfectly. That was the lesson. Power didn't need theatrics, it needed alignment. Behind him, the courthouse doors closed on a record that would ripple outward. Ahead, a child waited. He picked up his pace, boots light on the pavement, ready for what the next hearing would demand. The clinic smelled like disinfectant and warm plastic, a strange comfort after the courthouse's bright edge. He pushed through the doors and found her awake, eyes tracking the ceiling until they found him. Her smile was small but real. He took her hand, felt the squeeze twice, and let his shoulders drop for the first time all morning. "They fix it?" she asked, voice thin but hopeful. "They started fixing it," he said. "That's how big things change." He stayed until the nurse insisted she needed rest, then stepped into the hall and checked his phone. Messages stacked in quiet lines, updates from the clerk, alerts from news sites, a missed call from an unknown number he didn't return. Public attention had found the record. That was good. It was also dangerous. Outside, and the day had sharpened into noise. A producer asked for a comment. He declined politely. He walked instead, letting the city carry him toward the service entrance he'd used for years. Inside, the building felt different, less indifferent, more aware. People nodded now. Some looked away. Both were new. The clerk caught up near the archive, breathless. "They're trying to delay," he said. Motion to narrow scope. He nodded. "They will. We found more," the clerk added. "Not just this building." He stopped. "Put it together," he said. "Clean, timelines, names." The clerk swallowed, then nodded, resolve firming. "I can do that." In a quiet corner, the lawyer appeared, hesitant. She held a slim folder, edges bent. "I pulled old seminar notes," she said, "from years ago." He glanced at the cover and felt a small click inside him. "Thank you," he said. "I don't know if it helps," she added. "It helps the record," he replied. They worked without ceremony, pages aligned, dates matched. A pattern emerged that reached beyond one hearing, one child. He kept his focus narrow. What would matter tomorrow? What the judge could act on now? Preparation was mercy. It spared people from spectacle. By late afternoon, the Billionaire's counsel filed the motion. He read it once, then set it aside. The arguments were familiar: jurisdiction, burden, efficiency. He drafted a response that answered each point with the same calm precision he'd used before. No heat, just fit. The clerk returned with a printout, eyes bright. "It's bigger," he said, "but it's clean." He nodded. "We'll start where the light already is." As evening fell, the building emptied. He lingered, finishing a last review, then packed the folder. The lawyer hovered, hands twisting. "They'll come for you," she said, quietly. "They already did," he replied. "Quiet didn't work." Outside, dusk painted the street in bruised colors. He headed back to the clinic, mind cataloging the next steps. Delay would be their weapon. Visibility would be his shield. In the room, she slept again, face relaxed. He sat and listened to the machines, the steady beeps that counted survival in seconds. He thought of clocks and calendars, of how time could be bent by power and straightened by care. He thought of tomorrow's hearing and the narrow window that still mattered most. His phone buzzed. A message from the unknown number, clearer now. "Withdraw. We can make this easy." He typed one line and sent it. "Put it on the record." The phone went quiet. Near midnight, the nurse brought coffee and an update. Stable, watchful, hopeful. He thanked her and stayed until the room softened with sleep again. When he finally stood, his legs protested, but his resolve didn't. In the hallway, the clerk waited, coat on. "I'll be there early," he said. "I know," he replied. The city outside was calm, the kind that hides its fights. He walked home through it, past closed shops and glowing windows, carrying a folder that had become heavier with truth. Tomorrow would be louder. They would try to shrink the frame. He would keep it wide. At his door, he paused, listening to the quiet, then stepped inside. He laid the folder on the table and set an alarm. Somewhere across town, people with power planned their angles. Somewhere closer, a child breathed. He turned off the light and sat in the dark a moment longer, feeling the shape of what was coming. The record was open. Preparation was done. Tomorrow, the system would be asked to choose. Morning arrived without ceremony, gray light sliding across the table where the folder waited. He dressed quietly, the habits of early shifts guiding him, and stepped back into the city before it fully woke. The courthouse loomed ahead, already awake with movement, security lines longer than usual. Word had traveled. He joined the flow and felt the eyes, curious now, measuring. Inside, the gallery filled to the edges. Reporters whispered, pens poised. The clerk caught his eye and nodded, a small signal of readiness. At the table, he set the folder down and aligned the pages, the same ritual, the same calm. Across the aisle, and the billionaire arrived alone this time, confidence pared back to steel. The lawyer followed, shoulders tight, jaw set. The judge entered and called the matter to order. The motion to narrow scope was first. The billionaire's counsel argued efficiency, warned of precedent, invoked burden. The judge listened, expression unreadable. When it was his turn, he stood and answered each point with the record. He spoke of relevance anchored to dates, of burden already borne by families without shortcuts, of precedent that protected access rather than privilege. He kept his voice level. The room leaned in. The judge denied the motion. A murmur rippled, stilled by the gavel. He felt the decision land like a bolt set home. Not the end, but a door staying open. Next came testimony. The clerk read entries aloud, voice steady, names and timestamps forming a map. The billionaire's counsel objected less. Objections thinned against the weight of consistency. He asked for one clarification, then another, not to trap but to illuminate. Each answer widened the frame. The judge asked him to summarize. He did, briefly, translating process into consequence. He spoke of a system that worked when watched and drifted when hidden. He spoke of clocks and children and the cost of silence. He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. The billionaire stood, impatience flaring. "This is becoming a spectacle," he said. The judge met his gaze. Transparency often feels that way. The room breathed. A witness was called, compliance officer newly cautious. Questions landed, answers hesitated. Emails appeared on the screen, lines of intent and assumption exposed. He watched the billionaire's posture change, shoulders tightening, jaw clenched. This was the inversion he'd prepared for, power forced to answer to procedure. The judge ordered immediate compliance measures effective today, public calendars, independent oversight, notices posted. The clerk typed, voice clear as orders echoed. Cameras captured it all. He felt the victory strategy crest. Not applause, not collapse, but accountability made visible. Then the judge turned to him. "Your child's case," she said, "will proceed under the corrected process." He nodded, throat tight. "Thank you." The judge continued. "Given the findings, removal is denied." The room exhaled as one. He felt the sound before he felt anything else. The billionaire's counsel rose, asking for reconsideration. The judge denied it. "This court is done being hurried," she said. The billionaire said nothing. His silence spoke louder now. Adjournment was called. The gallery broke into motion, reporters surged. He stood steady and gathered the folder. The clerk grinned despite himself. The lawyer approached, eyes wet. "I'm sorry," she said. He nodded. "Help fix it," he replied. That's how apologies work. Outside, the air felt lighter. He answered a single question, careful to center process, not personalities. "This is about access," he said, "and kids." Then he turned away. At the clinic, the nurse met him with a smile he'd never seen before. "She's asking for you," she said. He moved faster than he meant to, heart thudding. In the room, she watched him approach, eyes bright. He took her hand, felt the squeeze, twice, stronger this time. "We stay?" she asked. "We stay," he said, and the words settled into the room like a promise kept. He sat with her until the machine softened into background, until the beeps matched his breathing. The phone buzzed with messages he didn't read. They could wait. This moment mattered. When he finally stepped into the hallway, he leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. The system had chosen, for once, not the easiest path but the right one. He felt the weight of the week lift a fraction, enough to breathe. Outside the window, the city moved on, unaware of the correction it had just absorbed. He opened his eyes, steady again. There would be follow-through, audits, resistance, dressed as routine. He was ready for that, too. He returned to the room and sat, keeping watch. The record was set. The consequence had landed. Oh, and somewhere deep in the machinery he understood, a gear had turned the other way. The room had settled into a softer rhythm, the kind that followed decisions that couldn't be undone. He sat beside the bed, chair pulled close, one hand resting over hers, feeling warmth where fear had lived for too long. Outside the window, afternoon light slanted in clean lines, honest and unshowy. He stayed until her eyelids fluttered closed again, then rose quietly and stepped into the corridor. His phone buzzed immediately. The clerk's name lit the screen. "They're moving fast," the clerk said. Oversight board convened, media's circling, and he hesitated. They traced the clause back further. Years. He closed his eyes briefly. "Put it together," he said, carefully. "We are," the clerk replied. "They can't bury it now." At the far end of the hall, the lawyer waited, posture different, no polish left to hide behind. She held a manila envelope, thick. "I found the original correspondence," she said, "from before my time." He took it, weight settling into his palm. "Thank you." "I don't expect forgiveness," she added. "I expect follow-through," he said. She nodded, relieved to be given work instead of absolution. Back at the courthouse, the atmosphere had shifted again. Less spectacle, more reckoning. Committees met in glass rooms. Staff moved with purpose. The billionaire arrived without entourage, face set, eyes scanning for exits that didn't exist anymore. Cameras tracked him anyway. The judge reconvened briefly to address the spillover. Findings were summarized, next steps outlined, names were read into the record. Each one landed like a stone. He listened, still, letting the process speak for itself. When the judge asked if he had anything further, he shook his head. "The record is enough," he said. Outside, microphones crowded. He answered one question, then another, keeping his words narrow. "This isn't about taking anyone down," he said. "It's about fixing what hurts people who can't afford shortcuts." The soundbite traveled. He watched it leave him and didn't chase it. Across the plaza, the billionaire stopped, finally, and looked back. Their eyes met. For a moment, power and labor stood level, stripped of costumes. The billionaire's expression shifted. Not apology, not rage, but something like recognition. He nodded once, stiff, and turned away. The ripple spread faster than he expected. Parents called hotlines. Clerks flagged files. Judges asked questions. The machine, once nudged, began to correct itself. He felt it like a change in pressure. At the clinic, the nurse met him with good news delivered carefully, stable, improving. He sat again, counting breaths, listening to the machine soften. When she woke, she smiled and squeezed twice. He smiled back, tears threatening now that it was safe to feel them. Later, as dusk gathered, he stepped outside with a cup of coffee and watched the city breathe. Messages stacked: thanks, anger, fear, hope. He read a few, then set the phone down. He'd done what he could today. The clerk texted one last time. Board recommends sanctions. Policy changes adopted. He replied, good. When night fell, he returned to the room and pulled the chair close. The folder lay on the side table, edges worn, its work mostly done. He rested a hand on it, a quiet goodbye. Tomorrow would bring implementation, audits, the slow work of keeping gears aligned. He would help where needed. He knew how. For now, he watched her sleep and let the hum of the building steady him. The humiliation that had opened this chapter felt distant, almost unreal, replaced by something sturdier. Dignity hadn't been granted. It had been reclaimed in public with witnesses. Outside, the city lights blinked on one by one, unaware of the small correction they now carried. He stayed where he was, present, unremarkable, exactly enough. Morning came quietly, the kind that doesn't demand anything except honesty. He sat by the window with a paper cup cooling in his hands and watched the city stretch awake. The machines in the room hummed at a gentler pace now, no longer sharp with alarm, just steady and patient. She slept on, face relaxed, the fight easing out of her features one breath at a time. He thought about the lobby where it started, the marble, the velvet rope, the way a uniform had erased him. That version of the morning felt distant now, like a story someone else told. The correction hadn't been dramatic in the end. No collapse, no shouting. Just records opened, clocks slowed, and a system reminded of its purpose. When she stirred, he was there. She blinked, found him, and smiled. He took her hand, felt the squeeze, twice, confident this time. "We going home?" she asked. "Soon," he said. "We're getting there." Outside the room, the nurse paused to share an update. Improving, cautious optimism, plans forming. He thanked her and stepped into the hall, phone buzzing with messages he no longer felt chased by. The clerk sent a final note before stepping back into anonymity. Oversight permanent. Changes filed. He replied with gratitude and let the phone rest. In the atrium, sunlight pooled on the floor where people moved with ordinary urgency. A reporter spotted him and hesitated, then lowered the mic. "Anything else you want to say?" she asked. He considered. "Watch the process," he said. "That's where the truth lives." He walked past the desk where he'd once been dismissed. The same security chief stood there, posture softer, eyes avoiding his. He didn't stop. Vindication didn't need commentary, it needed continuity. At the exit, the billionaire crossed his path, unguarded this time, just another man in a coat. They nodded to each other, a brief, complicated exchange. No words, none were owed. Outside, the air was clear. He breathed it in, feeling the weeks unwind from his shoulders. The city would move on, absorb the correction, test it. That was fine. Systems needed maintenance. He knew how to do that work. Back upstairs, she woke again, hungry this time. He laughed, a sound that surprised them both, and called the nurse. As she ate, he told her a simple version. How rules were fixed, how people listened, how staying calm mattered. She nodded, solemn, absorbing lessons that would shape her long after this room faded. When visiting hours ended, he stayed anyway, permission granted without fuss. The folder lay closed on the table, no longer a weapon, just paper. He thought about returning to night shifts, to filters and valves, to places power didn't look. That was fine too. Dignity traveled with him now. As evening settled, he stood by the window again and watched lights blink on across the city. Somewhere, other parents were filing papers, waiting in lines, hoping someone would listen. The thought grounded him. This wasn't the end of anything. It was a beginning that asked to be kept. He pulled the chair close and sat, present, listening to the soft hum that meant life continuing. The humiliation had been real, so was the justice. Neither defined him alone. What mattered was what came after. If this story stayed with you, ask me for the next story title and I'll take it from there. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. A judge laughed at a night guard's evidence until the courtroom went silent. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?